Welcome to Cybersecurity Today, the weekend edition. I'm your host, Jim Love. This week we have our regular panel. We have Terry Cutler, head of Cyology Labs. Terry, welcome.
How are you?
I'm doing great. And we have David Shipley, head of Beauceron Security in beautiful Fredericton. You're still in Fredericton, David?
I'm still in Fredericton. The insane Dave Shipley travel roadshow begins this week.
Okay, and we get the t-shirts for that. That's Clippy, right?
It is Clippy, and a shout out to, I think it was Justin with Binary Sec who's showing off this t-shirt or someone else going to DEF CON, but it is Clippy claiming responsibility for the CrowdStrike meltdown. In the vein of Game of Thrones, I wanted to know it was me. So that is the t-shirt that I'm wearing today. I thought it was hilarious. I think it's good to be able to laugh at ourselves in this industry. And remember, Clippy could come for any of us.
David is also our resident arts and culture critic. We define that quite broadly on this program. Today, we have a special guest for our panel. Tara Gold is a threat researcher with Cado Security. Is it pronounced Cado, Tara? Yep. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit, because you're new, you get to tell us a little bit about your company, what you do. What's Cado Security do and what do you do there?
Yeah, so I'm the threat research lead. So I specialize in malware research and threat intelligence. Cado is the first and only cloud-native DFI platform. It is an automated investigation and response platform that delivers insights from all data sources across cloud, SaaS, and on-prem in one platform, which enables security teams to investigate and respond to cyber incidents at high speed.
Cool. And what do you do as a threat researcher?
So to answer that question. So, security research, it can be a whole host of things: reverse engineering, threat hunting, threat intelligence. There can be programming in that, so creating scripts to assist those tasks. Some people would call it a cybersecurity handyman, so just sort of jack of all trades and those sorts.
The Swiss Army knife of cybersecurity. There you go.
Really? I'm just going to say at every company, security researcher can have a different meaning, so it really just depends.
And they're just fascinated because, like I said, people could bring in different things and you hear them say different things. You wonder, what is this mysterious, what is this threat research? But it is, I think you pointed out a lot of things. Good stuff. We're going to get started with the show. Here's the format for everybody. We're going to go over some of the key stories and the interesting stories from the past week in cybersecurity, and we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into those. And I'll just mention them because probably I've covered them this week. A couple of news stories that have come up for comment for me. There's one on certifications. There's another one on ransomware payouts being on the decline. And David pointed out the use of search terms as creating attack vectors. And then one of the reasons I brought you onto the program, Terry, was the unique attacks on the macOS. So that's what we're going to cover. Terry, do you want to pick up this first one on certifications? I picked it up as a story from Foot Partners. I always said it's not uncommon for me to see an alphabet beside people's names with all of the various certifications. And the question that I had, and the reason I focused on this, was people pay a lot of money for certifications, and does it pay off? And according to the study, non-certified IT skills are now earning an average cash pay premium of 9.6% compared to the base salary. And certified IT skills are commanding only a 6.5 premium. So at least there seems to be this break where people are starting to say, hey, learning on the job or learning from a practical point of view or learning wherever is just as important. Terry, what's your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I work with partners as well where some of the resources have, like you mentioned, alphabet soup. Literally, this guy was a certification junkie. His certifications went on 2 lines. It was crazy. Like I had to delete 3/4 of it just to match the rest of everybody else. So yeah, we're seeing a trend between IT certifications and non-certification programs. So non-certification programs could be like where a company is training their own employees on how to do things internally. But obviously, if they tried to go write the certification exam, it probably wouldn't match up. So I have mixed feelings about the whole education and cybersecurity fields. I work often with colleges that are trying to often revamp their programs, and they're not up to date. And a lot of times when we bring in interns, unfortunately, they're not even employable because they'll spend 3 years in college, for example, and they never installed Kali Linux. Like that is really weird. That's like, you shouldn't be like, you should have learned this on day 3, So it requires a balance, especially like, yes, you can have all the certifications to your name, but you also need to be able to articulate that into layman's terms to help upper management. So if you have any soft skills training as part of your IT training. It's going to help you in your career.
And I think this has dropped in a couple of conversations with groups like the Canadian Cybersecurity Network and others about how we are missing out on so much talent through gatekeeping and outdated hiring practices that are looking for the alphabet soup because we just get used to these processes for screening and evaluating, which by the way, I think AI is just going to make worse because it's going to use those past patterns. We're going to miss out on tremendous talent. Like when I think of some of the best folks I know in this space, they often come from non-tech traditional backgrounds. They've got an insatiable curiosity. They've got a tenacity, and then they've learned the practical tools of the trade. But to your point, Terry, I think, yeah, universities are the worst right now at fostering. I mean, computer science faculties in this country still don't actually teach security as a mandatory part of graduating computer scientists. So great. Wonder why software code has problems. I give just as much credence to someone who spent a couple of years learning hack the box, Kali Linux, practicing, develop that curiosity, and then you can shape and mold that person. But those are my thoughts. I'm curious, Terry, you're a security researcher.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on certification?
Yeah. This could take a while. So, like you mentioned curiosity. For me, whenever I've been interviewing people, that is the number one thing I look for because, if you're curious and interested in security, you can kind of learn anything, or be open to learning anything. I have no certifications. I do have a bachelor's and a master's, and they are technical degrees. Sure, it helped me understand architectures, operating systems, programming, etc. But I don't really I don't know how important it is, to be honest. Some of the best researchers that I have worked with, their degrees are in completely unrelated fields. It's because they had an interest in security and computers and a curiosity to learn. Whenever I've been interviewing for candidates, I'm obviously not going to throw out somebody's resume if they have certifications, but I don't really care if I'm honest.
You're
There's
seeing the
other
same
things that I
thing
would.
where, like in the UK, like they'll have the university offering a cybersecurity degree, right? Which is a broad
Mhm.
term. And it's like,
Yep.
okay, but do you want to be a malware researcher? Do you want to be an ethical hacker? Do you want to be a digital forensic guy? Like, like they think that the students think that they're going to come out of a university with a cybersecurity degree and expect six-figure salaries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I definitely have seen that here. And again, look, to be fair, cybersecurity is a very broad field, as you mentioned. There's so many different areas that you can go into. So it is hard to tailor a course for that, but that's maybe why it's not maybe the best avenue to take.
Terry, you may have raised the point is, if people have curiosity, if they have the practical skills, they're worth their weight in gold these days.
I look, at least when they're coming out of university, please at least give them the baseline so we can work with them. Like when I had one of my interns, I had to waste like 2.5 months. I had to give her access to all my cybersecurity training and the ethical hacker stuff. So she just spent time doing that before she was even usable, employable. So it's like, I wish they would have their programs up and running properly and to go with it. Like I had a chat with one of the local colleges here and they showed me their program and they're soliciting help from experts in the industry, but they're not leveraging our names in the program to say that, hey, there's some experts behind this that are putting this together. At least, not just that, it's like they wanted us to come in and teach the program. But first, they don't pay enough and we don't have the time to do this. So our job is to try to do this at scale via like on-demand learning.
And one
Yeah.
thing I'll add, so I had a chance to meet some of the folks with Cyber Alberta recently through the work Francis Watt is doing with the Canadian Cybersecurity Network. And they're really pursuing a fascinating idea of cyber apprenticeships and like the idea of how do we get federal government funding off of the current drug of choice, which is universities and college and formal programs into, and I love the idea of a national program, like a Red Seal kind of approach to building expertise, whether it's malware research, security operations, secure networking, whatever. That I think is the road forward because like what I want to see happen is a successful graduate from an apprenticeship program who's already worked with Terry for 3 years, who the first time they landed in Terry's door, you knew what their block one capabilities were and you were able to leverage that. And then you were able to build them up while running your business, not like stepping outside to run it in a college classroom, which Ain't no one got time for that.
And poor them if they have to work with me for 3 years.
Yeah. This, what all I can think of is what's second prize.
I guess like the only other thing I would add on that is, there's also the financial cost of these certifications. So, look, a lot of people want to get in security these days and IT in general. There's a lot of bodies, not necessarily like accredited education places that are offering these, but there's also, the private ones. They're charging huge amounts of money for these courses. Some of them don't even include the actual training. You have to do the sort of learning training on your own. You get a certification at the end, and then some of them you have to pay each year to even renew them.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's crazy.
That's a great point. Like you said, some of these courses are 2 or 3, up to $10,000 for a course versus you can go to university, you can get the course
Or
for 300
Google for
bucks.
free.
And the thing is that I think that's also the parents' fault too. So in some real situations, the parents were forcing their kids to go to university to get the local university diploma, but it means nothing in the industry unless you've got that certification. The certification is going to hold more weight. So it's hard to convince the parents that, hey, times have changed. Now, if you got a certification, you can go literally anywhere in the world. If you got the ethical hacker, if you got the OSCP, you have all these things, it's recognized worldwide versus having a local college.
So some distinction of which certifications are important. And some of them, I think you're absolutely right, Tara, are their certification mills.
Yeah. Well, we're also seeing cheating happening too, right? So going back to my contact with the alphabet soup, the certification junkie, I learned that sometimes they can be hanging out with a group of friends that are all trying to pass the same exam, and they're all in the room passing each other the answers. And next thing you know, they're getting certified up the wazoo in a week.
It's graphic. They just
Oh, okay. So, no, after certification junkies, you got nowhere to go, Terry.
Yep.
That's all I can say. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to move on to our next story. Ransomware has been increasingly profitable in 2024, apparently, according to the study I was reading, with cyber criminals collecting a staggering $459.8 million in ransom payments. This, of course, sets a record pace, potentially surpassing last year's $1.1 billion in total ransom payments. According to the study I read, Fortune 50 company had a $75 million payment. It seems that fewer companies are paying, but they're actually paying more. What do you guys think about this?
Chainalysis is doing some excellent work following the money, right? This is what trips up criminals since Al Capone's era. It's the accountants slash the crypto nerds that are figuring out where the cash is going and how much is there. Now, that's what they know from known wallets, et cetera. So I would safely assume that the 1.1 billion from last year and the almost 500 million on pace for the first half of this year is the conservative number because there's X amount of unknown wallet addresses that cash is probably told to. What's interesting is we're seeing more of the groups like Dark Angel, which are not trying to disrupt operations like the classic ransomware, your computers now belong to us. They're taking the data and then they're threatening to leak it. And what'll be interesting about this Fortune 50 company is we didn't learn about this through SEC disclosures. We haven't named this company. And that's odd. You would think would show up one of these reports, and we're seeing it here. And what'll be interesting to see is like, do we have another Uber CISO situation where it was paid to go away? And that's the strategy. Interesting to see. I think the work of the Global Anti-Ransomware Task Force in going at these criminal gangs brought to a close the first chapter of ransomware industry. That is everyone Wild West raiding everywhere like an old black and white Western film, just riding over the hills, robbing the ranchers blind. Now they have to be fast, focused, deliberate, and get in and get out and assume that their hard developed infrastructure, tooling, relationships are going to get burned. That means you got to go big and get the hell out. So I think we're into a nastier era of ransomware where the big game hunting strategy clearly has paid off, but the amount of damage they're going to do is massive. And we're seeing this in healthcare. The healthcare breach, United Health, was a $25 million ransom payment. And that's part of that $400 million story. It inflicted $1 billion of damage on the company and orders of magnitude more billions of dollars in damages to the healthcare industry in the United States, which is still recovering. It's a mess. And so when you think 25 million equals 1 billion in damage. If you apply that same math to the first 500 million this year, wow. Like that is the most devastating economic event, single event that we've seen, bigger than any of the hurricanes or storms we've seen. This is huge and it's not going away. And it gets to the last point I'll make. Until you cut off the money, and I know that's not easy, this industry is going nowhere.
I think we're also, one of the things we're seeing too is attack on small, medium-sized businesses. The average time that a hacker is in the network is 286 days. So I think that when a breach occurs, it's often too late to know that all this damage has occurred. Maybe they're not reporting the breach or the payout. That's why these numbers seem to be a little low. But if there's no disclosure, then nobody knows about it. So that's why it's important that the small businesses are probably going to be thinking, oh, look, the ransomware payments are going down. And now they become complacent, which is not good. So they need to make sure that their strategies are up to date, make sure they have their incident response playbooks up, get their audits done, because, it's just not a question of if, but when.
I think that was my fear, is that small and medium-sized businesses would read this and go, oh, well, the number of companies that are paying is down 27%. The number, the things are getting better, and they're never going to notice me. And as a matter of fact, after our session last week where we talked about cyber insurance, I actually phoned the CEO of a Canadian insurance company talking about cyber insurance. And I actually recorded that. I'm going to put it out as a special sort of teaser this weekend so that people can listen to that, because they can find out how they can actually get cyber insurance for small companies. And I put this company up because they answered the phone. If there's somebody else out there who's got an offering, give me a call or send me an email, and I'll make sure we talk about you as well. But the long-winded way of getting there, I talked to the CEO and he said, small businesses are still getting hit and they still believe that nobody's after them because they're so small.
Well, that's the comment we get all the time. Who's going to want to hack me? We sell fiberglass, or we're a bowling alley. As long as you have money, you're a target. And the cyber criminals know you don't have the time, money, or resources to deal with cybersecurity. And that makes you the number one target. As long as you got money, they're coming after you.
Malwarebytes actually had a report, I think it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, a ransomware that was actually targeting home users. Now, obviously, it's not going to be in the same amount of money as targeting large corporations, but it still just goes to show like they'll target everyone, home users, small businesses, large businesses, like everyone's game for them.
And remember too, this is not the only cyber criminal revenue source, right? So when we look at business email compromise, which is going huge, it was $2.9 billion last year. Ransomware, cool, but look what we do with phishing. And boy, that's been worse this year as well. So when you start adding this all up, it's staggering. And it's hard to feel like we can win sometimes. But sometimes the changes we need, like Terry, I think your point, until we have a ransomware payment registry, which is something I'm lobbying for in Ottawa, and they missed the boat with C26, the critical infrastructure protection law, but I'm hoping to get a separate law developed in Canada that simply says, listen, step one of any problem is getting a handle on it. So if you are going to make a ransomware payment, you have to register with FinTrack, and we'll know the payment, the wallet, the amount, the target, etc. And we can keep it confidential. But then we've got kind of the survey. What is going on in the world in the actual amounts? And then we can start looking at how we start choking off the money, because it's so key.
David, I want to pick up on a story you mentioned to me this week, and that was the use of search terms for creating attack vectors. Do you want to go over that?
Well, so we continue to see from various threat researchers, security researchers, poisoned search engine results that are leading people to malicious Google Play apps, fake stores, malicious websites, phishing, you name it. And it continues to be a persistent problem. And the issue fundamentally is the search engine advertising business model is a volume-based play. It's all automated. And we're seeing a lot of market concentration. This is why Google's in trouble, because they bought DoubleClick and the immense amount of power that's placed in there. But they don't care about weeding out these malicious links. That's a you problem from that industry's perspective. And it almost feels like, and my background, of course, is I started in journalism. But when I remember that back when we had responsible, local, ethical, national or regional or local media, you would have things like advertising standard councils. You would have things like broadcasting councils. You would have consequences for putting out garbage that got people defrauded. And we need to really rethink how these companies are held accountable. And this will eat into the profit margin of these big tech companies. But until they actually are forced to start building better ecosystems of trust, accountability, verifiability with these and slow down this fraud, this just becomes part of a cyber criminal multi-channel marketing strategy. I got my phishing, I got my poison search terms, I got SMS, I got like it's amazing. And to Derek's point, with Kali Linux and other tools, I've probably got some open source scripted Python script where I basically planned out my criminal campaign and I can do all the above with 5 keystrokes.
I'm just shocked that there's no responsibility on, and I don't want to pick on Google, but for anybody who's doing advertising. And I'm glad to hear you mention that small independent publications and podcasts may be, one of the better places to invest your money. Shameless plug there. No, sorry. But no, but this thing just troubles me because I've heard this over and over again about people using Google search and buying search ads to really start an attack. And, that's been going on for ages. And you're saying, David, that there's no responsibility from Google at all to do anything?
Well, I mean, we're in the most bizarre times when it comes to terms of service, right? So 2 weeks ago, Disney tried to get itself out of a court battle after someone died in one of its restaurants at Walt Disney World from an allergy reaction from food that wasn't supposed to have an allergen. And what they were trying to argue initially from their lawyers, and this was Darwin Award for Legal Strategy 2024 was, hey, the husband of this poor doctor who died, he signed up for a Disney Plus trial. In the Disney Plus trial terms of service, it says you agree to binding arbitration, so you can never sue us for anything we do. It's someone in the cavalcade of media murder that happened once that story broke said this was a bad idea. We should probably pull back from that and let this court case proceed. And they did. But it was a moment of truth when it comes to the giant liability shields in most terms of service. If you read most SaaS terms of service, there's this hilarious line, and we've all got it. But it says, like, this software is provided as is, where is, and is not guaranteed to be fit for purpose. It's basically like, can't touch this, right? And that's what's happening with these poison search display ad networks.
If you want to, the best place to hide a body is on page 2 of Google. Right? No one goes there. So if you're able to rank first on your search, most people click that and they think they're going to the real legit site, but it's misspelled. And then they let the hacker into your network. Oh man.
And,
Don't get me started.
and the choices Google made to amplify the value of its ad placement by putting the paid search results above page 1 stuff is exactly how criminals were like, oh, perfect. So they took Terry Cutler's page 2 body theory and Google's greed and crime.
Great. Now I need a disclaimer on the show. Somebody will pull that clip out of it. Talks about how Terry talked about how you hide a body on cybersecurity
He
today.
had too many cert junkies. It was a cert junkie.
Terry, you were going to bring us back to earth and bring this around. I think many Mac users, including yours truly, have been accused of being a little smug about the relative lack of attacks on Macs. And then I found out last week reading one story that my Mac OS was just fine, but all of the Windows programs that I've incorporated onto my system are busily bypassing the Mac OS protections. And that became a big story last week. And then your company had some bigger information on Mac OS vulnerabilities. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we discovered a Mac stealer campaign that was active earlier this year. The stealer is called Cado Stealer, and it's stealing credentials and crypto wallets from file stores. The main targets appear to be gaming accounts, with the stealer looking for Minecraft accounts, Battle.net accounts, and a large list of crypto wallets. The malware disguises itself as legitimate software, so Clean My Mac, Adobe Gen, and GTA 6 early release, which obviously doesn't exist. The malware is rented out as a malware as a service, with affiliates renting out the stealer for $500 per month. And then they earn a percentage of what their deployment of the stealer has stolen. Affiliate of the stealer is responsible for their own deployment. However, it appears that affiliates may not have received all that they were owed, which has led some to accuse the main operator of being a scammer, and that is what ended the campaign.
Clean My Mac, I've never downloaded because I thought it was a scam. It just seemed like too good to be true.
There is a legitimate one, but I mean, I think all the Mac, most Mac malware that I've seen always imitates Clean My Mac, and the way it pops up again, so to bring it back to Google Ads, I don't know specifically how DigStealer was being distributed, but I do suspect that Google Ads high likelihood, as other Mac stealer campaigns, a lot of the time Google Ads are being used for distribution, as well as just dodgy websites.
And what I finished with the story, Jim, was in the mea culpa for the first 6 months of the year with the big hack of Microsoft by the Chinese and the Russians. We saw this big statement about security is priority number one. And even a couple of weeks ago, we were celebrating that Microsoft is actually putting security as a key metric for performance management, for pay, bonuses, promotion, et cetera. Like actually putting the money where the mouth is when it comes to culture. But what was interesting is when these flaws in the Mac Office suite were pointed out, they got downplayed. And so Teams got patched, and I think something else got patched, but not all of the suite has been patched. It's kind of like, we'll get to it when we get to it. And it follows a bit of a pattern as well, where even last week, there was a series of Microsoft vulnerabilities that they tried to play down, that this is low. And it's like, well, guys, like, you're saying one thing over here, which I like on the executive side, and I think you need to do. But then the actions and the follow through are sending a whole other different signal about actually putting the words into practice.
So, Terry, any suggestions from you other than getting a T-shirt that says "Eat my words"?
Look, I mean, like whenever I do awareness training for individuals, that's one of the common questions I get. Well, which one is safer, a PC or a Mac? So obviously a Mac out of the gate is more secure because you don't have administrative access right out the gate. You have to type in the master password to be able to get on, to be able to install apps. Whereas Windows, you have carte blanche. So in the course, we teach them how to kind of turn your Windows into a Mac where you can instead of being an admin all the time, you'll be a standard user. But we're starting to see more attacks on Mac. But you have to understand at the moment you type in that master password, you're done on a malicious code. So, we were seeing the same thing, the whole Clean My Mac thing. We had something happen to us in the PC world with CCleaner a couple of years ago, right? The code got manipulated and then everybody was installing malware on their machines. So we're seeing a lot more supply chain attacks for sure.
And what'll be interesting, Jim, is one of the things I talked about in the wake of CrowdStrike is maybe enterprise strategies need to ensure operating system diversity and avoid giant monocolor situations, using more open source, potentially using Mac, so that if there is an OS level plus software or either or kind of issue like a CrowdStrike, again, you've got more resiliency in your system. Hi, Delta. I think they're looking pretty hard at Mac as well. But as that happens, you're going to have more criminal ROI by investing in attacking the Mac estate. And arguably, criminals are not stupid. They're lazy, because if they applied the cleverness and things they have to actually doing legitimate work, A, they'd be in cybersecurity, but B, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. It's the laziness that is the core part. But they're thinking smart about demographics. Like, think about the average individual who's buying a Mac versus buying the cheapest PC they can get a hold of. And if, as Tara's pointing out, we are seeing ransomware gangs targeting individuals, then hey, this person's going to have more wealth, right? So yeah, it's interesting to see this happen. It's a reminder not to be complacent, but man, Excel's a hell of a drug. Good luck getting rid of it. Like Google Sheets, you're not even close. Like, no, don't even try. Like, in numbers, God love you, Mac OS. I have tried so many times to use numbers, but there ain't nothing like that good hit of Excel.
So yeah, I think like we're already sort of seeing the trend from my limited purview into this. A lot of organizations are increasing their Mac estate, and as well, attacks on Mac OS have been increasing. There was an Elastic report that came out, I think it was last year, and the number of infected Mac devices from 2020 to 2023 had increased over 1,000%. So I do think that it's definitely trending that way. And as David said, threat actors, definitely not stupid. They will just acclimate with the trends. Moving the Mac, honestly, look, it might help, but there's also a chance that it might not.
Yeah, which leaves people like me, those people who are smart enough to pay 3 times as much for a laptop because it's got an Apple on the front of it, way less smug than ever, but we live in hope.
And a
Um,
reminder, Mac users, having an antivirus is a good thing. And be careful where you get your antivirus route.
yes. And on that happy note, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much to the panel. I hope this was great for the audience. If there are topics you out there in the audience want us to do a deeper dive into, let me know. You can send me comments about the show, or you can send me suggestions at editorial@technewsday.ca. I want to thank my panel, Terry from Cyology Labs, Terry,
Thanks for having me.
David Shipley from Beauceron Security,
Thanks for having me.
and our special guest this week is Tara Gould from Cado Security. Well, thank you very much, Tara.
Tara, it's a
Thank
pleasure to meet you, by the way.
Yes, you too. It was a lot of fun.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for spending part of your weekend with us. I'll be back on Monday morning. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a great weekend.